everything goes smoothly and you need it. And yes, as you heard, this meeting is being recorded. So, and there will be some links to useful resources posted later on. So I want to first of all, Christine, can you let me know if there's any teams that I need?
Kyle, I'm having trouble hearing you.
I'm getting an unstable connection warning. Can you any better now?
Now it seems fine.
Okay. Sorry about that. Internet issues on my side. Christine, do you know if there's anyone on this list we need to check for? Do we have everyone?
Kath is the one who's going to be checking that.
Okay.
Yes. So I will, I'm just getting my screen so I can see everyone in chat and in the meeting. I'm going to call out team names. And if you're here, if you can put something in the chat just to confirm that you are here. If I do not call out your name, it's because I've already ticked your team off. Team Friction, AIM Robotics.
AIM just came in.
Okay. Lambrick 1, 17427. Fellowship of the Robot, 18177. St. Pat's Mario's Machines, 1852, 5002. Lambrick 2, 18713. Lambrick 4, 18719. Lambrick 6, 18772. Cleanup Cruise SE, 1880. Marg, 13459. KP Timberwolves, 15479. Reynolds Raybots, 16353. Kalamaka, 16696. Dudley's Troopers, 17553. St. Pat's Inclined Robotics, 18191. St. Pat's Celtic Silverfish, 18589. Lambrick 3, 18718. Lambrick 5, 18771. Cleanup Crew TE, 18799. And Reynolds Robo Runners, 18840. I did get the other teams already checked off. I think many people will be watching the recording later, as well as the teams where some teams were obviously at the first drivers meeting earlier in the year.
So if your team was called out and you are here, please put a message in the chat saying with your team name or number saying that you're here.
All right, thanks, Kath and Christine, and welcome everyone. So let's start with the schedule. Here we are at the drivers meeting. You'll be submitting your official matches through the scoring system over the 24th to 30th, and we're asking teams to submit a video of one of those matches before the end of that period. And that will all lead into the virtual pits on the 31st, which will be a great way to get some of the team interaction that we would have had at a live event and see what each other have all been up to. That's also going to be a good practice for judging at provincials. And at that time, we'll also be releasing the final league rankings. So This season is a bit different with remote gameplay, and we're asking teams to take responsibility for a lot of details that would normally be handled by refs and the rest of the volunteer crew for doing your own scoring and keeping track of all the rules. First, to put out some great resources to help with this, including the game manual, resource page, and the Q&A forum. You're probably already using most of these, but we'll be sharing them again at the end of today. But we also still have the whole volunteer crew from a live event here to support you. And if you can't find the answers you're looking for in first resources, please send us a message and we'll be happy to help. And if there's anything about your strategy or rules interpretation that you're not sure of or want to verify, send us your question and or a video if that helps before you run your real matches, and we can help clarify things, make sure everything's working well. So next we've got a video. First is put together a video that's got a great summary of how remote matches scoring and rules work and what some key things to watch out for. I'd like to go through this and talk about some of the important things that we want to make sure everyone knows. So here's first head referee Mark Edelman. Theoretically.
Hi, Mark Edelman, Chief Head Referee for First Tech Challenge. Here on my remote field, I want to spend a few minutes talking about remote field scoring and setup for all of you who've been sort of convinced to be field personnel for the season. First off, thank you. We appreciate everybody's help in trying to make this season work as the best we can. Before we get started on the details, I wanted to talk a little bit about a handful of just general resources. First off, take the time to watch the game animation. It's a great way to get a familiarity with the flow of gameplay, right? If you're not familiar with the game, it's a great place to start. Recognize that it does not represent the complete suite of the rules. For that, you really need to talk about spending some time reading through part 2 of the game manual. And because we're talking about remote events, you want to make sure that it's game manual part 2 remote events, right? It's been tailored specifically to address this style of gameplay for this season. There's a great resource, our FTC Q&A forum, that also is a place where teams go to ask questions and get official answers. You want to make sure that you're keeping up to date with that. That'll help solidify your understanding of the gameplay and the rules. Would strongly recommend spending some time looking through the scoring system videos that have been created. They're a great resource, and they'll help you understand a lot about how the scoring system works and how to use it to be able to operate matches. And then I would really recommend for all the teams and the field personnel is practice. Right? So spend a lot of time working with understanding how the whole match flow works, all the way from field reset, all the way through finishing the match and scoring it. Practice that a bunch of times before it comes time to really do it for real. Okay, so my field here is set up in what I would call a reset configuration. Right, there's a couple of important pieces. I have my power shots flipped to the forward state. That's how they should begin. I have 4 rings here in my starter stack, on my starter stack location. I have 2 wobble goals, 1 each at the end of the 2 start lines. And I have 3 rings waiting ready for preload. Right? So this is sort of how we like to think about reset. In a traditional match, there'd be 3 more rings for the second robot on the Red Alliance, but because this is a remote match, there's only 3 needed. The other 3 I've already placed in the tower goal. So team brings the robot out, gets it set up in a position, and I'm going to pretend that this particular robot can only handle 2 rings, so the remaining ring is going to get placed into the tower goal. The robot preloads its 1 wobble goal. Okay, we got our robot all set up. the remaining wobble goal stays at the end of the start line, just like it was when it was set up. Okay, take a look around. Looks like our match is ready for play.
Okay, so thinking about how you set up your robot for your matches, your robot should be a preload one wobble goal into the robot. Now, preloading here can mean something as simple as sitting on the mat in contact with the robot, if that's what you want to do. Rings go either preload to the robot or in the tower goal.
To the forward state to get placed, set up. Okay, touching the controls, I need to make sure that they for play. I'm going to check with my team because I need to make sure that they understand it's now hands off. No touching the controls, no touching the robot, no touching any part of the field. This is the time frame where we now do our randomization, right? So in my case, I'm going to assume I got a 1, and so that means that the starter stack size should be 0, and the remaining 4 rings should now all go into my tower goal, just like any of the ones that weren't preloaded. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to begin match play. We start the scoring system or start our timer. After our 3, 2, 1, go, and the match begins.
Okay, so what that means is that when you're running your 6 official matches, that check-in before randomization is your last chance to change your mind about this being one of your official matches. Once you commit and do that randomization, it's just like a real match, and whatever happens, happens. So if you get your least favorite randomization state, or you started the wrong program, or the wheel falls off your robot, that's why you have 6 matches and multiple weeks. That's still what you go with. So
after our 3, 2, 1, go, and the match begins. Okay, so during the autonomous period, you're watching for a couple of key scoring activities. First is deliver the wobble goal. Right, so the robot is preloaded with 1, and it's looking to try to deliver. In our case, with the randomization of 1, that means target zone A. We're looking for the wobble goal to be delivered to that target zone. In order for the wobble goal to count as scored, it needs to be completely inside the zone. And that means that no part of it is outside. So what we're looking at is the outside edge of the tape. Is the wobble goal completely inside the volume created by extending that tape line upwards? Now, it is okay for the robot in a remote match to deliver both wobble goals. Right? So it could deliver both. Next up, we're paying attention to the rings. Our robot may take advantage of being able to try to shoot rings towards launch, rings towards our power shot targets. It may take advantage of the opportunity to try to score into the tower goal. Right? Both of those are expected activities. Last thing the robot's likely to try to do is to park. Right? So there's a navigation task that requires the robot to be in the launch line. Right? The launch line's our white line that sort of mostly divides the field in half. And in, again, just means that some part of the robot needs to be within the volume created by extending the sides of the line upwards infinitely. Okay. Autonomous period's over. We're looking.
Okay, so to recap, in autonomous, your robot might have done some or all of delivering the wobble goals to the target zone, or launch rings at the power shot targets or into the tower goal, and it might have navigated to the launch line. So the scoring software will ask you to record your score for the autonomous period at this point before moving on to driver control.
Around, we want to make sure we've counted all the rings. We're going to record that. We want to make sure we've paid attention to the status of the wobble goals. We're going to need to record that. Oh, sorry, wobble goals and power shot targets. We want to make sure we capture that because they have better value during the autonomous period. Okay, autonomous period's all done. We're scored. We're good. The game is transitioning. Match is transitioning into our next period, the driver control period. Okay. At this point, our human players should become active. They need to return any rings that are in the human player station, in any of the troughs on the backside of the power goal, to the field. They need to do that as quickly as is practical. Right? So there should be a steady flow of rings coming back anytime there's any rings in that area. Sometime during this part of the match, the human player should also reset our power shot targets. Right? There's a reset bar that makes it handy and easy to do all of them at once. But that needs to be done after the driver control period begins and before 10 seconds of the end game portion has elapsed. Right? So there's a window of time that needs to be done. And it needs to be done exactly once. Right? So they do not need to do this over and over again, just once. If by chance during the driver control period, one or more of these do get knocked back, it is okay for the human player to reset them. But there's no point in doing it up until right before the end game period begins. Right? That's the only time that we really care during the driver control period. The only point we really care about the power shot targets is what's their status right before end game. As field personnel, we want to start to watch for one of the more common penalties in this period, which is the ring possession limit. Right? So we're looking at robots are allowed to possess no more than 3 rings. For every ring beyond that, they get 1 minor penalty. And for every 5 seconds that continues, there's an additional minor penalty per ring. In other words, 5 rings, 2 minor penalties. 5 rings held for 5 seconds, 2 minor penalties, plus 2 more minor penalties. Okay, now we're getting ready for endgame. Right before.
Okay, so some key things to watch out for in the driver control period. First of all, the human player should be returning rings to the field steadily. Don't get into the habit of holding on to them and waiting for, say, your robot to be sitting in front of that chute ready to grab them. If you're a human player, think of yourself as more a part of the field than a participant in your team strategy. Your job is not to feed rings to your robots, just to efficiently drop them back through that chute onto the field. Another key thing to watch out for is the possession limit. So that max of 3 rings. That includes rings that are in your collection of scoring mechanisms, but it also includes anything else that's following the movement of your robot. So a ring that bounces and lands on top of your robot or gets caught under your drivetrain and dragged along with you, those also count against your possession limit, and so watch out for that to avoid penalties. Moving on to endgame.
For endgame, it's really important to take a look around and understand a few things. First, where are the wobble goals? Are they in an eligible place? Right? In order to be able to be scored at the end of the match for the drop zone achievement, the wobble goals need to either be not in the launch zone, in other words, not in that front portion of the field, or in a target zone. Right? So at this point, both of these wobble goals are eligible. Now this one you might say, well, it's in the launch zone, but it's an or. So as long as it's in a target zone or not in the launch zone, it's eligible. Right? At this point, they're still both eligible. Other thing we want to look at is, are there any rings on the wobble goals? Right? Rings are only eligible for endgame scoring on wobble goals if they were put on the wobble goal during the endgame. So we want to make sure we understand what's the status of the rings on the wobble goals, where are the wobble goals, and what's the status of our power shot targets. Okay, things are getting exciting. We're down in the last 30 seconds. The robot is achieving everything it can. Gets our wobble goals out. Okay, match is over. Okay. Now we're looking for.
Okay, so about the end game. So first of all, if you're planning to do anything with the wobble goals in the end game, you need to have brought them over to the other side of the field before the start of that end game buzzer. And in general, end game tasks have to be done during that 30-second end game period to be worth points. So that's scoring rings onto the wobble goals, power shot targets, and delivering the wobble goals. All of those are not worth points if they're done early.
We're assessing a handful of things. We want to take a look at our power shot targets, count the number that are in the scored state, that's the back state, We want to record the number of rings we saw go into each of the goals on our tower goal. We want to look at the wobble goals, how many were delivered into the drop zone. We want to count the number of rings on each of those wobble goals. And then there's one more possible place that our wobble goal could have been delivered during endgame, which is back to the start line. Remember that in order to be eligible to be scored, wobble goals and rings need to not be currently touched by a robot of the same color, right? So if my red robot is still touching the wobble goal here, that would not count as scored. Okay, great job, match is done. Let's talk a little bit about some of the penalties you're likely to see during the match. Ring possession limit, we talked about it, no more than 3, and additional for each ring beyond 3, and again, additional for every 5 seconds that that's maintained. Launch line violation, right? In order for a robot to be allowed to launch a ring, it needs to be in the launch zone. So that means no part of it can be outside the launch zone, right? And so looking for meaningful extension, right? So if it's just a wire, we probably don't care. But if there's a wheel, a mechanism, something that's significant comes going into the outside the launch zone, that should be a penalty. Launching out of the sides of the field. Out of the back, that's okay. We expect robots to shoot that direction. Out of the sides or out of the front, those are not okay. Illegal power shot scoring, right? In order for a power shot target to count as scored, it needs to have been moved from the front unscored state to the back scored state by direct contact with a ring. Any other method generates a major penalty. We're still going to count that power shot target as scored, but the major penalty will offset the value. With that, you've gotten a quick, easy introduction to some of the knowledge you need in order to be able to be a good scoring resource for matches and to be able to help with field reset. Good luck. You do have questions later. Take advantage of the FTC forum. It's a great resource for finding out more information, more details, and getting clarification as soon as is reasonable.
All right, so does anyone have any questions now about rules or scoring or how these remote matches are going to work?
So teams can either type a question in the chat, or you are welcome to actually unmute yourself and ask a question. And while we're waiting, I will ask Kyle to explain things about ring possession and penalties for rings that are sort of coming out of the return rack while the robot is there holding 3 rings already.
Right. So for possession, the key test from the game manual is this definition of controlling, which boils down to if the object is following the movement of the robot. So if you push through a pile of rings and move on and leave them behind, that's not possession, but a ring that's grabbed by your robot obviously is. A ring that you're pushing with you is controlled, that sort of thing. As far as rings that come out of the chute, there's a few things to keep track of here. First of all, rings have to contact the field before being controlled by a robot. So you don't want to just park in front of the chute and grab rings directly out of it. And then there's also if rings are coming out of the chute and bouncing onto your robot, be careful with your possession limit there. Does that cover what you want me to talk about, Christine? Or is there other issues?
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of questions coming through the forums too about a robot that's currently holding 3 rings and getting ready to shoot. If the contact is incidental, it's not a penalty. But
Yeah.
if the robot is holding 3 rings and parks itself strategically so that it is basically blocking the rings from rolling randomly around the field while it's shooting, that begins to be a place where you're sort of incurring the penalties. And your teams are expected to assign penalties to yourself. And I know that's a very difficult thing to figure out how to do.
That's right. Thanks, Christine.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat, so unless anyone has anything else, I will move on, but please send us your questions if something comes up later. So, let's check in, make sure everybody is ready to run their remote matches where they have a field. And the field could be anything from something that looks like the picture here right up to the full official remote field. And I think at least in Victoria, there may be some fields that teams can visit on the day. Is that right, Christine?
On January 30th, we do have an open field day for Victoria teams. They do need to let me know by this Friday if they think they would like to use the open field on January 30th. If there are any other teams that are having trouble getting access to a field for their matches next week, again, put it in the chat, unmute yourself, and we can try to figure out what we can do. From looking at the list, I think a lot of you have competed and already know what your field is going to be. But if there are any questions, if you're not sure, please let us know about it. We do have a question in the chat, and they're asking, do teams need to video record their matches and upload them? And in this case, I will answer it. Actually, I will wait for the next 2 slides from now, and then I will answer that question.
Okay, perfect. So you'll be submitting the scores for your 6 official matches from the 24th to 30th. And I would encourage you, if you haven't already competed or haven't already done so, to check out the first scoring software and ideally run some practice matches to get familiar with it before you run your official matches. It works well, but it can be finicky until you get the interface figured out. So I definitely encourage you to check that out early. And then here we are, Christine.
Okay, so yes, we do want you to submit a video of at least one of your scored matches. If your robot is scoring somewhere in the 40s for all 6 matches, you can submit a video of any one of the matches. If your robot has most of the scores in the 40s and one match is 75, we would like to see a video of the high scoring match. So as much as you can. The other point that we really want to offer is the sooner that you submit the video. So, we can actually help you with, was this a penalty situation? Did your robot legally score points? So if you are testing stuff out this week and you want to submit a video to get some feedback from the referees, please do so as soon as you can. You're not limited. The form only has 2 spots for putting in a YouTube link, but you are more than welcome to go back and submit the form 2 or 3 times if you've got multiple videos that you would like to share. We do plan to use at least clips from some of the videos as part of the event on January 31st. So please make sure that anybody who is shown in the video has signed the first photo release consent forms. If you are properly registered with your team, you will automatically have completed your photo consents.
Christine, could we add
on this slide, but it has also been sent out to the coaches of all of the teams, and we will post these slides on our website probably tomorrow. So if you need the link, you can get it from there.
Christine, could we add a section in the form, either a checkbox or a place where they can write saying this is a practice video that they'd like feedback on, specifically if it's not one of their official videos?
So the way the form is set up right now, it asks you to identify which match it is, but that is just a text field. So
Okay.
Go ahead and just write practice match instead of match 2, match 3, or something like that.
Christine, can we put some text, like a text, some words on that one to suggest So if you want to put practice, type practice in the field. Can we?
Yes, you can just type practice. So basically,
I mean,
it says,
give the.
okay, I will go, I will edit the form so that it says something
Okay.
like match
Okay.
number or practice match.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Okay.
Thank you.
There is a question for the referees been posted in the chat. Do you want me to read it out?
Yes, please.
If a robot accidentally flings a wobble goal, should we give a penalty? I guess the definition of fling might come into play, but.
Yes, let's see. That would fall, I think, under G27 if you're flinging it out of the playing field, separately from delivering it to the launch zone in the end game. So, robot may not deliberately remove gaming elements from the playing field. Gaming elements that inadvertently fall outside the playing field should be returned as easy as is safe and convenient. But if it's deliberate, that will also incur a minor penalty per game element removed. If you're flinging it within the field, I'm not sure why you want to, but I don't see anything wrong with that.
I actually think the question was an accidental fling. Like if a robot is moving the wobble goal and something goes wrong in the wobble goal, this says flings back into the field.
Okay, that would count as a failure to deliver it to the drop zone, but would not otherwise be a penalty.
Okay. There's another question. Our team has encountered situations where when shooting at the power shots, the ring makes direct contact with the power shot and the power shot moves, but not all the way back. It sort of gets stuck in the middle between the scored and not scored positions. Would a power shot in this position count as scored?
So the question there is whether it's which side of vertical the power shot is on. If it's farther away, pointing away from the field, whether or not it's all the way back, that counts as scored.
This is the question is from my team. I was there, and the power shot is almost vertical.
Okay, so
I cannot tell. It's leading towards inward or outwards. I swear it's so weird. It's definitely it sounds like it's a fault on the power shot, the power, because it's just sometimes most of the time you can freely move the power shot for that one, and just occasionally when we touch it, it's just very stiff.
Okay, that does sound like your power shot is unusually stiff, and if that happened during a live match,
Kyle,
yeah.
Before you answer that, there was a game Q&A on that today.
Okay.
That's also I asked that in the forum.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're consistent in the answer that we give. And the answer is the power shot target must be oriented away from the field to count as scored. Any orientation beyond vertical in the direction away from the field should be counted. It doesn't have to be fully back.
Okay, so
if movement of the power shot target described in the question is not normal, you should adjust the power shot target assembly so that it moves easily between forward and backward. So the team should be making sure that their power shot can move freely, because if you hit it and it only goes halfway, it's not scored. It has to go beyond halfway.
Got it.
Sorry, Kyle. It's just I had seen that today, and I wasn't sure if you had seen that they had released that.
I'd seen that too. That's what I was basing my answer on as well.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. And then speaking of questions, we have set up for this event the virtual question box as another way to ask questions as a volunteer team, which I think we'll be sharing the link in the chat at the end of this. Right, Christine? Or in the slides when we share those.
So it will be in the slides. It has already been sent out to every team. And if Kath could post it in the chat so that the team members have it as well. Because I know all of our volunteers like it when I volunteer them for an extra job.
Yes, I'm just going to open that slide and get it started, but
Okay.
it'll be there in a second.
Okay. Would you like me to talk about virtual pits,
Yes,
Kyle?
please. You know more about them than I do.
Okay, so one of the things we've noticed this year is that our teams aren't really getting a great opportunity to talk with each other and learn and even just get to see what each other's robots are doing. So on January 31st, for our league wrap-up event, we are going to hold something called Virtual Pits. Basically, it's going to be a giant Zoom call, and teams can actually have their own breakout room. And in there, you can share like photos of your robot, maybe a video of part of what it's scoring. It could be, if you've got CAD, you could actually have the CAD model up and explain some of the mechanisms, or even just talk about the terrible time your team has had meeting and, you know, ask other teams for help. And so the idea is we'll work in 10-minute intervals. And so a team can actually, hopefully you can divide in half so that even if you've only got 4 team members at the virtual pits on the 31st, 2 of them could be in your pit, 2 of them could be out visiting other pits. And so we'll, the first 5 minutes, we're going to encourage a team to actually have some form of presentation. It doesn't have to be glitzy and glossy, but this is an opportunity to learn how to share information about your team in a remote way. And then the second 5 minutes, the guests in your pit will hopefully be asking you questions about what you've done. And then at the 10-minute mark, we'll send out a note saying, please move to another team pit. And so the guests will get a chance to circulate around. And hopefully your team members, because we had said your team can divide in half, the half that was out visiting will come back partway through and let the team members who were in the pit have their opportunity to go visit as well. So that's the advantage of having a little bit of recorded information in that first 5-minute period, is it will be consistent even when the team members change over. But again, there's no requirement. You can actually present the information any way you want. You could just put up a picture of each of your team members and just talk about what you've been doing this season. So think of it, for those of you who were at the competition last year, we know a lot of the teams sort of walk around and see what the other teams are doing. Sometimes a team will have a display that people can read, but other teams are just sort of standing there working on their robot, and people are still there asking you questions. So that's what we're trying to create. We'll start the event at 6:30. We will run the breakout rooms in 10-minute intervals until about 7:30. And then after that, we're going to have a short team showcase using clips from the videos that you've been submitting. And we'll release the league rankings for, I guess, League 3, and then the overall league rankings for the teams from all the first 3 league events. So does anybody have any questions about virtual pits? I will say this is our first time to do virtual pits. So I'm expecting many of the teams will be sort of just figuring it out, and that's okay. We want you guys to get a chance to try this out. It does seem like we will be doing remote judging at championships at the end of April. And so we're going to hopefully give you guys 2 or 3 opportunities to try presenting information about your team in a remote setting so that you learn, and when it comes time to talk to the judges, you guys already know how to do that.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with for your robots this tournament. Does anyone have any more questions? Or Christine, do you have anything you'd like to close off with?
I can't wait to see your robot videos. I have to say, I really miss getting a chance to see your teams competing head to head this year, but It is definitely fun to get to see the team members cheering for the robots. And so please send in your videos. We do like looking at them. I know I'm not the only volunteer who enjoys that opportunity.
Definitely not.
Just a comment on the links that have been going to chat. The first link was for virtual pits, which your coaches have already dealt with. The second link is the question box, a virtual question box. So sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure everyone heard about the correction.
And of course, you can always reach out to me and I will direct questions onto our volunteers. They will probably get them faster if you go through the virtual question box, but use whatever contact information you have. Okay, if we're done. Okay, so any last questions? Anybody want to unmute and ask a question? We are assuming that by the time you guys have competed in 2 or 3 league events, you'll know the rules and you will be able to accurately score how your robot's doing. So we are really looking forward to seeing how things have changed since November, because we know a lot of the teams have been working hard on their robots.
Sorry, just to jump in one last time. If you arrived pretty late, around 7:30 or so, if you can just put your team name and number if there wasn't team members from your team here earlier, just in case we got any other teams show up throughout the meeting.
Okay, I'm going to stop the